71, take one. Action! Cut, please. Good.
The original film was written with a sequel in mind, in that the goal was always to see if we could create an Australian boogeyman character. So we actually had the idea right back from the very start.
We were talking in the background about sequel ideas for Wolf Creek 2, just spitballing for a few months. And eventually we came up with something that we thought really worked well.
The character at the end of the first film walked off into the sunset. So the idea would be that in the start of the next film we'd walk back out of the sunset and the story would continue.
It was always, from a creative perspective, important to try and do a film that not only did justice to the first film but that could stand on its own and be something quite unique and different. So we really took our time with it.
You have to be quite clever with sequels, I think, because the audience come with preconceptions and ideas about what a sequel might do.
When we did get it to the point of a shooting script, I thought it was fantastic. I thought we'd nailed it.
You know, as soon as we sold the first film the first time around, we actually had an offer to make a sequel immediately, so straight away. And at that time, I said no because it took so long to get the first movie right. That I thought if we just pop out a sequel the same year, it'd be really bad, it'd be a terrible sequel, and it will really end any possibility for further movies.
G'day.
I have to go to a very strange place to be Mick Taylor. The thought of doing that guy again just makes me feel queasy, you know. I mean, everyone knows Mick Taylor.
He's creepy. People love him. He takes us by surprise. He's scary, and he always seems to come back.
He's so malevolent and he's so destructive, and he's sort of inhuman in so many ways that maybe he's just not a real person at all.
You know, the kind of person that you'd be really happy to meet in the outback if anything went wrong, because this guy knows his way around and this guy knows what he's doing. This is his land. Unfortunately, this guy is Mick Taylor.
He's anathema to me. I'm a father of 6 kids, and I don't like that kind of person, so I had to forget all that and find a justification for being him. So in the end, what I came to is Mick's an impersonation of my father if Mick wasn't evil. So if Mick wasn't evil, he'd be quite a good guy to have a beer with, and quite a larrikin and a lot of fun.
Mick Taylor's a name, pig shooter and general fucking outback legend.
The script has been developed for a long time, and there are a couple of different variations of the opening scene in the film.
Greg was always wanted that part of the film to have quite a classic, big screen, sort of almost Hollywood-style Western feel about it. It's a bit Sergio Leone, actually, to the extent that we're actually even putting a windmill in a foreground, exactly like Sergio did in a couple of shots, and it's like a little homage.
In the opening sequence as well, there's a few really cool practical effects. One of the parts is where Mick shoots one of the cops in the head and blows his head off. You know, those kind of things take a lot of planning and a lot of, you know, pre-design to make sure that it all works out the way that you want it to work out. In the cut, we then have basically an entire sort of blood bag of bits and pieces and chunks that we explode, so that when you see him get hit in the head in one shot, you can quickly cut to the next shot and see the explosion. It kind of all seamlessly comes together.
There's an innate sense in Australian psyche of a distrust or a hatred of authority. There always has been.
Not a lot of pigs down south.
And in some ways Mick personifies that, and that scene gives us a little taste of what his power could be like.
Yeah, that's brilliant. That's great.
So it really just goes bang. Yeah. So it'll start its rotation under you. Yeah.
We had GoPros all over the place, barrel rolling a car through the air, and you're attached to the bonnet and you're sort of sailing through the air.
And I had an idea for what I wanted to happen, but then once Zev came on and started designing the stunt with me, he suggested a completely different way of doing the stunt, which was 5 times more spectacular than I had imagined we were going to do. So Zev, our stunt coordinator, is actually driving the car in that opening epic stunt sequence. When you're doing a stunt like that, it's always very anxious time on set because it's someone's physically put himself in danger and you hope that it's going to be okay. And actually, I couldn't even look when it was actually happening. I was basically hiding behind a bush because I just, it's a very nerve-wracking thing to see someone put themselves in danger like that because it can go horribly wrong. And accidents happen all the time. But being that we had an incredibly, great stunt team, it went perfectly to plan. The car landed exactly where it was supposed to land and everything was okay. It looked spectacular. It's the opening of the film. It's a chance to make a really big impact on the audience and have them really, thrown back in their seats.
Or I could make you go away.
First time I saw Wolf Creek, I was working in the cinema, sweeping popcorn, serving popcorn. And I remember people were sort of coming up with a certain look on their face. And so I snuck in because I could.
I remember the first time I saw the poster art for Wolf Creek, I found it totally mesmerising because there was this girl in bright daylight, which is kind of different to any other sort of horror poster I'd ever seen in that way. And I just thought it was genius because I was so intrigued, and in fact I was so intrigued that I couldn't watch the film, but I got my flatmate to tell me the whole story. It's like, I need to know what happens in Wolf Creek. I can't watch it, but I need to know, but I can't see it, but tell me now.
The theatre was full and I had strangers on either side of me. We came to a certain point in the film and both of these strangers reached out and grabbed both my legs at the same time. So I'll never forget the effect it had.
It packed a huge punch, which is why it made such an impact all around the world.
This hype and this air about it. And when I saw it, I got my pants. It was this one. That gave me nightmares for ages.
Well, the other character in the movie is the outback, which is what Mick is part of, and the landscape, especially in the Flinders, is extraordinary and so cinematic and so desolate and inviting and yet mysterious and horrifying at the same time.
The first film was epic looking, but we only shot this very small part, and I thought that was it. And then this time we had a bit more money. Rob said, why don't we have a look up here? So we actually opened up the entire Flinders Ranges region. This is the Pandora's box of the Flinders Ranges. We actually were able to open completely and go anywhere in the entire area and show the epic landscape around that part of the world.
When you do a film like this and you go away from the capital city and you go off to a small town like Hawker to shoot in the Flinders Ranges, what's wonderful about that is the community that the crew becomes, because everyone's staying in the same place. And so I think it's actually a really positive thing for the shoot and builds a real sense of camaraderie around the crew.
Driving out there for the first time, it's just, hill after hill of red dirt and rock. It's almost like you're in an alien environment, like Mars or something. In that sense, it's a perfect place for a character, a villain like Mick Taylor to be lurking and waiting for his prey.
Oh yeah, look, I always travel up north when I'm doing a bit of hunting,
I mean, Flinders, that's such an amazing place. It's got this quality of its own. It's the most beautiful, barren land. First time you see it, the sun's rising over these dusty stone hills and there's very little vegetation. And you just get this scale of this damn thing, it's so grand and it's so beautiful. It was a really beautiful place to spend a lot of time. And there's this real earthy spiritual quality to being out there. There's something just incredibly beautiful about it, very cinematic, and I know, you put a camera there and you're winning.
It's kind of like a gold mine, that area for filming. I mean, while we were there were 2 other movies all shooting around the area because it's just such a beautiful and spectacular little landscape.
Finding the right young actors in Australia is a big enough task, but then you've got to find 2 great young actors that actually speak fluent German. That's really hard for any casting director, but Greg was resolute. No, we'll find him here.
Shannon and Philippe just embodied those roles, and kind of they were the characters in some way. And I always like to try and find an actor who basically only has to go halfway to become the character. So they're basically part of the character is already in the actor, and it's really just about ultimately inhabit the character 100%.
Philippe and I have had an extraordinary journey of sort of crossing paths quite unexpectedly. Because we trained together at school, we were a couple of years apart.
And the second audition was a sort of a audition / chemistry test. So the day I was there, we had 2 Rutgers and 2 Katarinas.
And I remember that moment of us just, having a big old hug outside the studio and looking at each other and saying, let's go and have fun. Rutger especially is really committed to seeing what he calls the real Australia and the real people rather than just what you would see on the posters and on the postcards. So he's absolutely dead set on taking the back roads and the completely alternative route and showing Katarina a time of her life.
Was meinst du? Ne?
One of the pivotal sequences in the film is, of course, when our 2 backpackers, our German backpackers, actually end up face-to-face meeting Mick Taylor over their campfire scene.
What the bloody hell are you buggers doing out here?
Mick gets out of his truck and he's backlit by all the big halogen headlights on the back of his truck. And he's just this black silhouette, just that unmistakable shape with the hat. So straight away you're setting up Mick's in control of this situation. So we played with that lighting concept for the whole scene. As a cinematographer, it's just fantastic being able to play with elements like that.
In designing the action in the campfire scene where Mick confronts Rutger and Katarina, first of all, myself and the actors rehearsed it, and I talked through my ideas. And then once we had a basic blocking, Zev came in and had a look at what we're doing. And Zev's always one for doing things for real, which is great, and getting the actor to do it. So he was encouraging them to really go for it and to sort of own the performance and own the kind of action, which was great. I think the actors were totally into it. They kind of had rehearsed their thing, so it was kind of, it was kind of like an elegant violence with that sequence. You know what I mean? It was kind of like this poetic dance of death that happened between the 2 actors, and the coverage just kind of followed them, and it naturally kind of unfolded and ends with Rutger being butchered.
Yeah, not too much.
I reckon.
Handsome corpse.
Cutting.
Whoa. How long was that out for?
It's almost that thing of basically the grimmer the content, the lighter the set does tend to become. And when we're doing scenes like we're butchering Rutger's corpse, I don't think for a second anyone was really thinking about it for real.
I think this is the first in cinema history, yes. I think we're doing something no one's ever done.
When you look at it on camera at the end, you go, "Oh my God, that looks horrific!" But at the time, you're just shooting the material and setting it up. When you've got 30 people standing around staring at John Jarrett cutting off a fake penis and then throwing it around and talking with it, it becomes a bit silly. And you kind of have to, because otherwise you'd go mad thinking about what you're actually doing.
The work in making those prosthetics behave at the right time, like the cutting of a neck, that looks fast on screen, but it takes up a lot of time on set.
Rick and Charmaine Connolly doing the makeup effects for the film. When we really wanted to create something special for Rutger's head getting cut off by Mick. I hadn't seen what I wanted to see before recently, where you basically saw someone actually get their head physically cut off on screen. And I thought it'd be great to see that in a really extreme fashion, not for the sake of just being extreme or gory, but to actually confront the audience with the idea of what that would really look like for real, and to just put it there and have the audience to have to deal with that concept. And so we spent a lot of time working out and designing how we'd show it, what do you see, what do you not see, what are the elements that would have to go into that sequence to make it look really convincing. I remember one point looking over at the crew and just seeing a row of faces and just seeing them all kind of like looking in kind of horror and wonder at the kind of what was going on. It was almost as if I were watching someone making a snuff movie, because what we're watching is this horrific kind of scene unfolding, and all these crew were just kind of going like, oh my God, like I can't believe what I'm seeing. We did probably 8 or 9 takes of actually dropping the head onto the ground. The problem with the latex is that it was quite bouncy. It looked like dropping a basketball.
Oh, shit. And action!
Being the victim, you have one incredible bonus, and that is that the empathy of absolutely everyone on that set, and in fact everyone who's going to see this. John has the task of revealing what everybody spends their life, or most people spend their life trying to hide.
Shooting the Mick and Kana scene was very intense for me, because the content of the scene is incredibly intense and really, really full on. And you can very much feel everyone, there's the immediate kind of action area where everyone's running around and doing things and setting up. Then outside of that, you can feel everyone kind of like watching through the trees.
And Shannon, she is so good, and she was so in the moment. What she was giving out was so volcanic. For an instant there, she dragged me so into Mick, and she was so into her, I forgot the crew was there.
We're going to spend a nice, long few months together.
That was a very intense one to shoot, because basically we had Shannon, literally running down the road, being pursued by the F-100, and I was constantly worried that she's going to fall over and get run over.
And she didn't become a speed hump. That was what was best of all.
And then we had the 2 stunt performers, Philly playing Shannon's character, running through the woods with her hands tied and die rolling through shrubs and stuff, as she was chased by Lance driving the F-100.
I've had a pretty good run of running through the bush and being chased by the F-100, making sure that I didn't fall over anything that was jutting out anywhere.
Oh, jeez. That looked really good.
So we first meet Paul driving on the highway, smoking a joint. He's sort of been travelling for a number of months, and that's about as far as Paul's happiness goes before Katerina runs out onto the road, bloodied and torn from a recent episode with Mick, and he has to stop the car and take him what's just happened.
Hey, you get hit. It's all right, what happened?
Well, Ryan and I have made a little pact that, one day it would be really nice to do a scene together where we actually get to speak the same language to each other and communicate in more than tears and snot and sweat and blood and many, many different nuances and shades of screaming.
Did you get hit? It's your own. What? It's all right. Come on, we're going to get you out of here, all right?
And then you've got Mick in his truck chasing Paul and Katerina in the Jeep at night. And you don't often see that kind of extended chase scene in Australian films, for example. Shooting action generally takes a long time. We didn't have endless amounts of time to shoot all this stuff. Much of that stuff of our actors in the car driving and reacting to getting hit and swerving and carrying on is all done with the cars completely stationary. And we're just creating the effect of them bush bashing through the middle of the night, through the middle of the desert.
But it's really hard to do these scenes like the driving from a maniac in a truck when you're not actually in that situation. In reality, you may be in a stationary Jeep on the ground with 5 crews sort of rocking the damn car with a dust machine, and you've got makeup on your face.
Set. Back. Okay, you just had to bang up the arse, crash. Here we go, and action, John.
Y tus trailers, visita mi canal.
you'd start the day with a production meeting at a kind of boardroom table, and you'd have Greg bringing out a truck miniature, little kangaroo miniatures, and he'd be showing everyone how he's going to shoot a particular shot.
The truck comes up, hits it, nudges it down, it goes down about 100-foot drop. I plan and storyboard and build models and do everything I can do to basically have a dry run at making the movie.
And in production meetings, I've thought they were really useful because you can use words all the time, but we are making a film.
He wouldn't just visually give us a look at how he's doing it, he'd do all the sound effects blowing up.
I had two things with me the entire time, a big whiteboard and I had my storyboard board. We pretty much storyboarded 95% of the film. The storyboard board was basically really as a way to kind of shorthand communications with everyone. So basically I would have it and they'd come up and say, what are we doing? And you just kind of go, well, we're going to do this, 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 and this, and this is how it's going to relate. And the whiteboard was essentially to do the actual shooting plan. There's kind of like a little mini map designing the most efficient way to get through the coverage. And so those kind of things in tandem kind of work very well because you can refer to the amount of angles or precise angles you can get from one particular setup so that you can make the most out of each shooting day. The biggest action sequence in the entire movie, which was basically 2 weeks of truck stunts in the outback at 45-degree heat with a crew that never worked together before and an actor who hadn't done it all in 7 years, plus an impossible shot list, and say go. I mean, there are many chase sequences in movies, so we thought, how can we be original and different and do stuff that's actually tonally right for a Wolf Creek movie and doesn't feel too Hollywood, it doesn't feel too kind of movie-esque.
Standing by and action.
And that sequence in particular was the first one we storyboarded because we knew that it was going to be so complex and so much action that it was really crucial that we got it done.
Hey, there's more guts back there than we got under the hood, right?
Mick has found his way to the highway too and found this massive truck, this semi-trailer, and then chases the poor pommy guy.
There's a number of near misses. We hit kangaroos, he tries to get Mick off the road, he tries to beat him up hills, so there's a very Spielberg, Julian sort of idea to it.
Such a dark animal, it's like a rhinoceros.
The truck, the day it arrived, was a very exciting day because it travelled all the way over from Victoria. On the way over, people somehow found out that it was going to be in Wolf Creek 2, so there was a local newspaper in some small town where it appeared, the truck that's going to be in Wolf Creek 2. It was kind of building a legend on the way across to be in the movie. When it finally arrived, it was a massive moment because it's a beautiful looking old truck. And then John was trying to christen it with a bottle of champagne, and ultimately the champagne bottle wouldn't break on the bumper bar, so the truck was denying us christening it. It took us months and months and months and months to find the road train. And, it's really crucial to have the right vehicles. It's as important as the actors. Not saying that actors and cars are similar, but the texture of the car, the sound of the car, everything to do with the car is a huge design feature. The road train in particular, we had that car up there, that truck up there, and it just did such an amazing job for those couple of weeks we had it. And then it has to die in the film.
Part of capturing the big chase sequences, that we'd often have specialist rigs rigged on the truck or on the Jeep with cameras trying to get different angles.
Again, they lucked out and got a replica cabin of the truck and put it on a trailer so that we had very controlled conditions. So the footage we got, you'd swear blind I was driving the truck.
Let's play, eh?
None of those kangaroos are real, they're all visual effects, but of course we had to shoot the truck driving down the road with the Jeep before any of those visual effects are done, way before of course, because they're all done much later in the process of making the film. So we needed to sort of have some idea of the shots we needed to shoot that the kangaroos would then be put into digitally later.
Marty Pepper, who is the visual effects supervisor in the film, got involved in the process very early. and they basically came on at the point where we took the 2D storyboards and made 3D animatics out of them.
And the animatic gave us a guide of where the kangaroos were going to be and how many there were going to be and where they were going to first hit the Jeep and then hit the truck.
It's sometimes hard to imagine how they will actually be pulled off. But when you can see a 3D version of that, or an animated version of the sequence, you can pretty much see how all the camera angles are going to work, so it becomes much more achievable for people and doesn't seem so scary.
So that's a very carefully planned sequence that basically is done shot for shot for the animatics. So that was designed, that sequence is designed quite early in pre-production, and then we just shoot it exactly as pre-planned, and then it's all put together at the end of the process, and it looks fantastic.
Hey! Shit! Flying kangaroo! Oh! Sorry, Skippy! Hey!
Mick's pretty hell-bent on getting this kid, and he pushes him off the cliff. He falls down the cliff, survives this car accident, and looks up to sort of say, you know, you missed me, you fucker. To which Mick replies with a truck sent down the hill in his general direction.
When we were designing the movie, we were very concerned that we didn't want to have the stunt scenes looking phony or fake, and so we wanted to do everything for real. Wanted to do it like a 70s kind of action movie. And so we had really good stunt drivers who actually drove all the stunts for real. So all the car chases, hits, impacts in the movie are real, and the everything the Jeep does is done on the spot. There's no CGI, there's no trickery involved. My Ponga location was a difficult one to find, and it was the last location we locked in because we're trying to match a location in Hawker for the top of the cliff and then the cliff top and the base we're trying to make those two things look better in the same location.
A couple of hours south of Adelaide where there's these big rolling hills leading down to quite deep gullies. And that ended up being an ideal location to try and stage this kind of stunt. So part of the job is blending those two kind of quite sort of different landscapes together. So we've got the Flinders Ranges on one hand and we've got my Ponga, which is kind of big brown rolling hills on the other.
The planning of my Ponga was probably 2-month-long exercise in having all the teams go down there and basically all of the various departments looking at it, examining it, planning it, working out the engineering, working out how to basically technically get these things to happen the split second, exactly where we wanted them to go, and take out all the random elements that could happen in a stunt like that. We had to have a separate truck to hold the truck and the Jeep halfway up the cliff, and I think it was a 40 or 50 metre drop. So basically both vehicles were elevated and they had a lever that was pulled at a certain time for them to take off and fulfill their journey to the end of the bottom of the cliff. The truck had to hit the Jeep, but then it also had to create a huge fireball. And so what they did was they dug a huge bunch of pits around the impact zone, and then basically they had charges set, so wherever it landed they would basically be able to hit the right button and basically make a fire pit of explosive go off, so it would look like it's an explosive from the vehicle.
To actually capture these huge stunts, we utilised all of our cameras basically. We had 2 stunts to shoot. First the Jeep comes down and lands in a cloud of dust.
That was fucking incredible.
Great.
You could actually survive that.
That's going to get fucked.
It's going to get seriously.
That was perfect though. Look at that position. Now I can just step out of it and continue the scene.
The second day at my Ponga we shot the truck coming down. Some of the GoPros we really did put into pretty dangerous situations. I think we ended up losing 3 of them, just disappeared or got melted or destroyed or blown up. We had about six or 7 of them on the truck. We had a few more on the cliff face. We had one of the C300s up on the cliff and another one down in the gully. They were kept a little bit out of harm's way because we didn't really want to lose those. And then a little bit further back we had our Ariel Lexus, which were manned by operators. So that was just fantastic, and so it sort of made the whole sequence just using all those cameras and really trying to get as much out of it as we could.
A lot of suspense because basically at a certain point the entire set gets taken over by the first AD.
There's a little system here with flags. I'll be up there with Clint
And then at a certain point, he hands the entire thing over to the stunt coordinator. So there's an enormous amount of protocol that goes on with that kind of stunt, where essentially, once it's all decided, everyone just sits back, myself included, and watches it happen.
I don't think any of those cameras. There's another one like on front. That scared the shit out of me, that experience.
Is that your magic arm?
Yeah.
Not so magic no more.
Oh, fuck, it's still hot.
Oh, you'd imagine it be.
Yeah.
Now, this might need some surgery because it's actually melted, I believe. And what's important is there's the SD card, and that's perfectly okay.
The other major shot is that's right, the only thing that survived is look. Look at the side there.
Are you serious?
I can't find.
Cool.
Oh my god.
You got half a dozen on
that was on the stump. So if that image survived, that's going to be holy shit.
Even if it was done digitally, you couldn't even design it, to be as good as it was. It would just work perfectly. It's just a great thing to watch something like that happen for real. To have an idea like that and say, wouldn't it be great to do? What if the road train came off the cliff and landed the thing? And a couple of years later, be sitting there and seeing it happen is really satisfying.
And Paul runs off and finds this very lonely little farmhouse with this old farming couple in it.
The farmhouse we found at Port Wakefield, we actually had a different location chosen halfway to Hawker, but we were driving on a location scout for a highway one day, and I basically just saw the roof and just said, what's that? We happened to go there on the day that the farmer, or the guy who was looking after the place, was there. Just drove in and just went, wow, what is this place? And the guy just said, well, it's just an abandoned old house, and what do you want to do with it? And we said, we'd like to use it for film, and we had the location within 2 weeks, and when you see it in the film, and it looks like people have been living there for 50 years, but it's been abandoned for 100 years. So it's a tribute to Rob Webb and these guys that they got to look so good. But it's a spectacular location.
There's lots of scenes in this hallway, and the brief here is the religious vibe to this house. So that's what this room is, like a room that a boy grew up in and has since left, and it's sort of locked in time. So it's reminiscent almost of a different period of life, a very formal table setting. All the house has been dressed completely. When we came here there was nothing here, and we've cleaned it and fumigated it and worked here. Art department have tirelessly to get it to this stage.
It's all right, love. You're safe now.
So I think what we do is we go there, you cut to a mid-shot of the real actress with the blurry set and her just going like that and falling into frame, and then you come back to John walking up, and then you cut back to her close-up, and then we're good. That's good. Okay. Lovely.
Hey, baby. Could have had a good time, you and me.
The nighttime horse sequence was a challenging one as well. That location is a paddock that is full of saltbush, which is something for horses to eat. And we basically, again, we're driving around and just sort of saw it and just thought it looked interesting. And it wasn't actually in the script like that.
The horse chase sequence was something that John was very keen on doing, and in conversations with Greg prior to getting the film funded, that set piece was developed in the script.
Cut, please.
The location defined the scene, because we just got out with it and said we could actually make this amazing kind of suspense sequence by having him duck through these really tall salt bushes. The idea was to see the horse from his point of view, so you could always see it just going on the tops and fly high over the sea. It's a natural maze actually is what it's called.
it's the first sort of contact. It's really interesting to see because the first sort of contact that Mick and Paul have had, they have no idea who each other are before that.
Whip to the shit, so setting up.
Standing up.
And whip, 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 and it goes around your neck and he pulls you in like this. And just as he does, you've got to say something that lets him know that you're English.
Just leave me alone.
Greg's working process is a very open one. He's not overly precious about things that he's got in his mind or in his script. And that's not to say that he's also not very clear about what he wants, because he's absolutely clear.
Greg's tremendous to work with because, one, he's amazingly bright, very intelligent guy and astute. He guides very well. I think that's the art of being a good director. He suggests stuff and it's usually right, and he just guides a take to perfection.
He's so amazing, and I've never quite worked with someone that's completely hands your job over to you, that he was testing the limits to how far we could go so that he could then work backwards from there.
You know, it's dangerous with Greg because everything that you bring to a brainstorming session about a scene, he's playful enough with the material to let you do it.
And that's the joy of working with Greg. You work with Greg, not for him.
We worked at the old Hendon Studios, which was where we shot the first movie, so it was kind of a very cyclical thing in the sense that we basically backtracked a lot of locations from the first film, but completely expanded them in lots of different ways.
And this is Mick's lair, and built by the fabulous Rob Webb and his team.
Our very first step, chalking it out on the floor so everyone can get an idea of the dimensions.
Usually when I work in the studio I don't like it, but I really felt like I was underground here. I felt like I was in the place. It's so brilliant.
It was really quite breathtaking and very cleverly constructed. Toby had told Robert how he wanted to shoot it, so there was nothing wasted.
The challenge was to say, okay, we're going to have two guys sitting in a chair opposite each other, and it has to have the same amount of drama and tension and suspense as the previous scenes you've seen.
He wakes up in this lair I'm sitting in, and Mick toys with him, has a good time with him, has this quiz which he likes to call Aussie History.
That scene they wanted us to audition with, which is really daunting, it's basically a 18 to 25 minute take in one shot. And Mick Taylor was being played by a lady who I went to drama school with a texter as a knife. She's going like, yeah, I will cut out your tongue.
In Melbourne, we actually used Greg's office. And halfway through the second test, when it's rules that no one could ever come into the audition room when an actor's in that emotional state, the door opened. I was about to pounce on whoever was walking through the door. It turned out to be two men in blue, two police officers, because they've been hearing all these screaming and treacherous sounds. All the neighbours in the area had heard this man being held captive by a maniac and had rung the police.
I've got this little game we can play, kind of like a quiz.
The quiz, it's intense, it's scary, but it's enthralling.
Keeping that interesting as we could when basically dealing with two close-ups and two reverses of actors for a really long period of time. We talked about making the lighting quite dramatic. Particularly with John, we were very careful about the exact angle for the light on Mick Taylor, because when he's hit with a light at a certain angle, a demonic sort of features creep out of his face, and he kind of almost looks like some sort of devilish creature. We did that in a test at our production office before we even started shooting, and Greg said, I like that, what's happening with John's head when you put that light over the top of his head like that. I said, that looks pretty weird, doesn't it? And he said, I like that.
My word, eh? You are a knowledgeable little prick.
Very about a kind of competitiveness with those two. I think both of them wanted to bring their A game to that scene, and for it to work, both of them had to be operating on all cylinders and really playing at a very high level.
Brian's been extraordinary. He's very focused He's there and he just gives you everything. And poor bastards screamed and yelled for 7 weeks.
Tus trailers, visita mi canal.
And he can take it, you know. He can give and he can take. He's never been daunted by anything that I've done to him. I've done plenty.
Don't you ever say that! Don't you ever fucking say that! Alright?
So working with John has been fantastic. He hate me saying it, but he's actually a massive softie. So like, you know, where you just see this badass on the screen, sort of like, you know, I will kill. Oh, sorry, you know, mate, are you alright? You get me back, mate. And so, you know, we'd work each other up, we'd give each other grief. You know, during scenes that we had to, you know, if it was funny, frustrating in the torture scene, we had to sort of get at him, I'd tell him to stick it. We'd scream at each other, we'd egg each other on. And then once we sort of got what we needed, we'd make sure we had a joke and sort of, you know, diffuse it all. But I think, you know, it's that level of commitment to the material that we're dealing with that John has brought, and it's been really helpful in bringing out in myself.
It's only towards the end of that scene that, you know, we've been singing along with Mick and they've been having this great rollicking time with rum and all the rest of it. Towards the end of that scene, we begin to realise that Mick is absolutely batshit insane.
Ah, forgot to mention. For each one that you get wrong, I get to grind off a finger.
I do have to go fairly well into character or into that mood, because, you know, you can't be having a coffee and telling a few jokes and then they say, okay, John, it's time to come and stab this guy. Oh yeah, okay, well, you know, it just doesn't work that way.
I had to keep sort of finding ways to enter myself into a world that is probably the worst place that a person could ever find himself in. Things like I listened to some horrible music when we were doing this torture scene. You know, actually the whole day during the scene, because I didn't want to give myself a chance to get out of that headspace. It's quite easy if you go out there and you're having a lovely chat to Cam or you know, to your other cast about what you did on the weekend, to forget where you are in the film. So that had two sort of effects. You know, it's really fun to do that. It's a lot of fun as an actor, sort of explore emotion, and when you get it right, it's a really good sign when your makeup artist is looking at the monitor like this, you know, or walking away even. That's a desired effect.
Once you walk out of Mick's lair itself, you then go into the tunnels, and the mining tunnels are physically exist now up in a town called Burra.
Burra is the sole mining town, and in the 1800s it was bigger than Melbourne apparently at the same time.
It's this extraordinary old cidery, so it's from the 1880s or something, but basically it's a cidery that's under the town, and there's this remarkable series of networks and caverns. In the Chamber of Horrors, or the Tunnel of Death as I call it, we had, I think there was, you know, 15 or 20 different bodies in that section. And the idea of that was, you know, the idea of that section was to really show just the variety of Mick's insanity and how many people he'd been killing. And it also indicates to the audience that Mick has been doing this for a long time. So the overall effect of that sequence is to basically just chill the audience with the idea of just, you know, how monstrous this character is.
And as Paul's trying to find his way through the tunnels and get out, he sees a glimpse of heaven. And so you sort of follow that, whilst that's never said in any of the dialogue or any of the film, you're not saying that's hell, this is heaven or whatever, but however, you're actually using those symbolic ideas as a way of how are we going to light this? How are we going to light the tunnels in between? And how's that glimpse of heaven going to look like to Paul when he does see it down the end of the tunnel? He sees the light shining down onto the stairs. And it is another layer that you kind of layer on top of that, rather than saying, oh, it's just going to be a bright light coming down the stairs. You actually say, well, no, it's actually his glimpse of heaven. So you give him a whole little sort of thing happening in his head. And then that informs you, stylistically, how you're going to deal with the lighting and the shots and the construction of those scenes.
The first film operates almost entirely on this idea of implication. So for the sequel, I felt it was important to actually show the things. This is, the first film sets up the idea of the horror, what this guy could be, and the implication is there. And in this film, you really pay it off because you have to show where he lives. You've got to show what he's been doing and demonstrate visually to the audience, all those things we implied, here it is. And so the lair and Mick's cave is really taking the audience right into what's implied in the first film about what this guy really gets up to out there. And also to show the scale of the horror of what he's been up to as a character, which is this vast underground mining site that he's transformed into a kind of like a killing zone.
You're nothing but foreign vermin, a stinking introduced species.
We had a good time editing the film because we had a very kind of open, organic process about trying to find the right rhythm for scenes, the right length of the things, and that was a very organic kind of process, is the only way I can describe it, in the sense that basically we just kind of felt our way through the various issues and the various sequences and kind of kept at things until we kind of felt they were working in the right kind of way.
With so much action in the film, it was a bit of a juggling act between horror and action and suspense and what have you. The scariest thing of it all is that Mick is a crazed madman lunatic who is going to kill you. How much crazy do we use and how much evil quiet do we use, which sort of helped shape him as a ruthless villain.
Music for me is is one of the most important and powerful things in film. Johnny Climack is the composer on the film. I just really wanted to work with him because I love his music. Paul Perello is the sound designer on the film. Paul and his guys went out and did a lot of extra recording of vehicles to basically create the character of Mick's truck and to make the sound of the truck an extension of Mick's character and personality. And they did that for both vehicles, for Mick's road train and for his actual personal truck. We've tried to add subliminal levels of sound in there as well. So we've done things like add a whole lot of different sub-sounds to the vehicles that basically should give the audience a chilling kind of emotional reaction to them, even though they don't know why. So we've been experimenting with those kind of ideas about how to psychologically suggest things to the audience that are beyond just the obvious. Film is obviously, one of the most collaborative art forms. I think it was Jean Renoir who said that the best way to express your personality is to let other people express theirs. Allowing other people to create is really the job of the director. Well, it's one way to approach directing, and it's the way that I kind of approach it. Tapping into other people's creative energy and allowing them to be creative, and allowing them to have ideas and to own ideas and to fully express to bring out the best of their ability is what I like to do. It's what I aspire to do as a director, is to see what people are capable of. And that goes for the actors as well. I believe that particularly for film acting as well, the actors have to so inhabit their role and own their role to do good acting. So it stands to reason that you would basically allow them the freedom to invent and create, to fully inhabit the thing that they're creating, which is their performance. And as a director, you're really there as an assistant, and you can either help them or you can't help them. So you want to work out ways to help them get to where they want to go. And then you're ultimately serving the film by doing that. Again, it goes back to my feeling that the job itself is a privilege to do it, that you're in a privileged position of authority and control, and it's not to be fucked with or taken lightly, that responsibility. And I don't take it lightly, but also enjoy it.
Right leg wrong, left leg strong. I'll say that again. Right leg wrong, left leg strong.
Yeah. So, right, you know what you're doing here?
Sorry, mate.
So,
been distracted by the director.